Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So we have received an update with the military land mapping system that is showing an update in regards to the Zaporizhzhia offensive by Ukrainian forces, specifically within the confines of the Robatna pocket. We now have all listed Ukrainian combat brigades that have been dedicated to that failing offensive operation. Now, the units involved, and we're going to look at the current units that military land and other sources believe the Ukrainians have committed in expanding the Robatna pocket. So first, we have the 14th Operational Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard. We have the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. Again, as this is defined as an air assault brigade, the unit does have tanks. It has been given Western armored vehicles and main battle tanks to augment its infantry brigades. There is the 47th Mechanized Brigade, the 78th Regiment Air Assault Forces, the Scala Assault Battalion, the 118th Mechanized Brigade, an additional Air Mobile Brigade, the 46th Air Mobile Brigade, the 117th Mechanized Brigade, the 116th Mechanized Brigade, elements of the 1st Tank Brigade, 1st Tank Battalion, 3rd Operational Brigade, Spartan of the National Guard, Ukrainian National Guard, 33rd Mechanized Brigade, and the 11th Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard, and the 15th Operational Brigade, Karadag, Ukrainian National Guard. So again, the number of brigades committed by Ukrainian forces are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Ukrainian brigades. On the other side are the Russian forces. We have the 7th Air Assault Division, and then we have other elements of the Russian army as well, as you can see here being as I continue to go through. The actual deep state map gives a bit better disposition of Russian forces. Again, if we look and we start looking at Russian forces, obviously you have the 76th Division. So most of the 76th Air Assault Division, Airborne Division of the Russian VDV has been committed to this ongoing defensive operation, predominantly on the Russian left flank or the western side of the Robatna salient. There are other Russian units, obviously, involved meeting this continued operation by the Ukrainians, but we believe at this point that the Ukrainian operation in this pocket has, for all intents and purposes, failed. Now, with that being said, the Ukrainians have, within the last 48 hours, launched robust strikes against targets in Sevastopol. We believe that these strikes have destroyed 2 Russian vessels, a Kilo-class submarine and a Rapucha amphibious landing ship. Now, what are the Ukrainians using to reach out and strike targets in Sevastopol? Well, this is the system right here, the Storm Shadow. And I want to talk about this system and kind of go over some of the specifications of this system. Obviously, it's a joint missile developed by the French and the British. It has a specialized broach warhead. That is a tandem warhead designed to engage and destroy hardened targets. So normally, this missile would be designed to target and engage a bunker complex, a command and control node, a hardened target. And again, this system was used against these two warships, which indeed are not hardened targets. The size of the missile is 2,900 pounds or 1,300 kilograms. The warhead is 990 pounds or 450 kilograms. The operational range of this missile, once it's launched from a Ukrainian or NATO jet, is 550 kilometers or 340 miles. It has a speed of 0.95 Mach or 323 meters per second or 1,060 feet per second. Its guided system is GPS, INS, IRR, and TERPORM. So again, if you read the original synopsis of the Storm Shadow. The Storm Shadow is a Franco-British, low observable, long-range, stealth, air-launched cruise missile developed since 1994 by Matra and British Aerospace, now manufactured by MBDA, very large defense manufacturer. So again, these systems have been handed over to the Ukrainians, and I would have to say that the Ukrainians obviously are receiving very detailed information about targets located in Sevastopol. The United States, using its satellite capabilities, are sending real-time information to the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians then use that information to launch these attacks against Russian targets. Clearly, whether it's direct NATO intervention, direct intervention by the United States, the Russian military, the Russian Air Defense Forces, the Russian Ground Forces, the Russian Navy, the Russian Air Force, right now is having significant challenges in interdicting this weapon system. That cannot be denied at this point. So why are the Ukrainians targeting these ships? Why are they targeting these vessels in dry dock, which essentially are not threatening Ukrainian forces? A ship in dry dock is not a military target, a military asset that is actively being used. Now, the Kilo-class submarine that was destroyed, obviously that can fire cruise missiles. Very valid military target. The amphibious warfare ship, in all probability, given the very robust defense network that the Ukrainians have set up along its coastlines near Odessa and south of Odessa, the likelihood that the Russians would use these amphibious warfare ships to launch an attack against the Ukrainian coast is very low. So why would the Ukrainians target these vessels? Well, it's to make headlines. It's to create a narrative, create propaganda. The missiles, in all probability, those storm shadows, and there's only a finite amount of these storm shadows. These are very valuable weapon systems. The storm shadow would probably be more useful at attacking a frontline command and control node, a headquarters unit. But that receives much less publicity than if the Ukrainians were attacking a large target in Sevastopol. It gets more headlines. The Ukrainians are attempting to shift the narrative from what has happened in Robatna, this pocket. This offensive has, again, failed. So the Ukrainians are attempting to shift the narrative to what is perceived as successful operations, such as the strike on those ships in Sevastopol. At the same time, we also know the Ukrainians have launched an offensive on Andriivka, just south of Bakhmut. This is Bakhmut, highly contested city that the Russians seized control over in a multi-month offensive operation. They drove Ukrainian forces out of this area. But recently, within the last 24 hours, the Ukrainians are reporting success near this town of Andriivka. Engaged the 72nd Motorized Rifle Brigade. This unit engaged the Russian 72nd Motorized Rifle Brigade, engaged elements of the Ukrainian 22nd Mechanized Brigade, the 3rd Assault Brigade, Azov, of the Ukrainian National Guard, supported by elements of the Kraken Specialized Intelligence Unit, augmented by forces from the 28th Mechanized Brigade, the 118th Territorial Brigade, and the 80th Air Assault Brigade as well. So the Ukrainians are reporting that they have essentially destroyed and or enveloped the 72nd Motorized Rifle Brigade in this sector near the village of Andriivka. Let's go over and look at the actual village of Andriivka, where we can get an idea of what this battlescape looks like. So here it is. Again, very small village. Now, when the Ukrainians say that they've engaged and destroyed the Russian 72nd Motorized Rifle Brigade, an entire Russian brigade is not going to be used to defend this one village. I mean, you can physically count the number of houses in this very, very small village. And the Ukrainians are saying they took control of a town. I wouldn't really call it a town. I would call it a settlement or a village. More likely than not, defending this area would probably be a battalion-sized element. So when the Ukrainians say they've destroyed the entire 72nd Motorized Rifle Brigade, which is normally going to consist of 3 motorized rifle battalions, a tank battalion, upwards to 2 to 3 artillery and multiple launch rocket battalions, a reconnaissance battalion, an engineer battalion. This would not be something that an entire brigade would defend. Now, because the Ukrainians feel like or at least they believe they have destroyed an element of the 72nd Motorized Rifle Brigade. They're proclaiming they have destroyed the entire brigade. But again, you're not going to use an entire brigade on a small village that has 3 streets. It's just not going to happen. Now, did the Ukrainians engage an element of the 72nd Brigade and possibly destroy that element? Possibly. It's very difficult to ascertain exactly what happened. But the idea that they destroyed the entire brigade near the city of Andriivka, I would say at this point, is not probable. It's not reasonable. So that's kind of where we set for today. Again, we expect that the Ukrainians / North Atlantic Treaty Organization / United States are going to continue to use these storm shadows against Russian targets. And it's, again, as I repeat myself, it's very apparent that the Russians are having challenges identifying and targeting these missile systems. Now, obviously, the United States is also using other systems as well that is not being talked about. Electronic warfare systems, jamming systems, systems designed to negate the multi-layers of Russian air defenses in the Crimea. It's happening. As we speak, the Ukrainians are talking about receiving the ATACMS from the United States. They're talking about receiving F-16s from the United States. Folks, this war is going to escalate. I have to wonder what contingency plans right now are in Moscow to answer the deployment of F-16s and ATACMS missiles that could be handed over to the Ukrainians. This war is not de-escalating. It is continuing to escalate. It is both continuing to escalate in terms of the targets that the Ukrainians are attacking, the targets that the Russians are attacking, and more importantly, the assistance that the United States and NATO is giving to the Ukrainians in targeting areas inside of Russia. This is a concerning war. Incredibly concerning war. Much more greater in terms of the possibility of escalation than at any point during the worst years of the Cold War. And the American people are oblivious to what is happening. So we will continue to watch. We will continue to report. Thank you for joining us today. More to come very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.